Hi, everyone. Let's give 30 seconds so you can talk about yourself and what you do. Please, Anne.
My name's Anne Miura-Ko. I'm a co-founding partner of Floodgate, and I also teach at Stanford.
Karen Richardson. I'm a Silicon Valley former tech executive, now professional board member and friend of Punta Mita in Mexico.
I'm Celeste North. I'm founder of NuFlick, a startup on the film distribution online, focused on independent films and film festivals.
I'm Rebecca Lipon. I'm a female engineer. I'm somebody who's very involved in trying to increase the number of women doing technology startups.
I'm Cristina Palacios, and I'm founder of Aventones, a company that focuses on making transportation more efficient in large companies.
Well, I'm really glad to be sitting here with you. You are like inspiring women for me. I bet there are a lot of examples of inspiring women throughout the history. And nowadays, what comes to my mind is Alexandra Wilkins from Guild Group, this successful e-commerce company. I also bet she's in the connecting bubble Alan just presented to us, inspiring other women. And here comes my first question to you, Cristina. I'm sure someone inspired you to become an entrepreneur. So who was your inspiring role model and why?
No, I never wanted to be an entrepreneur. I went to university and I got out and I said, no, like the logical way was to become an executive and this successful woman that, no, I don't know, that I had been created to be, no? Or I wanted to be. But it was actually out of frustration that I became an entrepreneur. I wasn't happy with the way things were going, and I wanted to create something that would have a bigger social impact. So that's why I created Aventones. But no, like a role model, no.
So you didn't have this like inspire women or company?
No, but my partners, Alberto and Federico Casas, both were like huge inspirations to become an entrepreneur because they already were entrepreneurs. Okay. So they really pushed us, Nacho and I, my other partner, to become entrepreneurs. We both came from the same background, large corporations, and had no intentions of becoming entrepreneurs.
Okay, and what about you, Celeste?
Well, I didn't start, similar to Cristina, I didn't start my startup out of inspiration out of somebody. It was also something that frustrated me. But I do have a couple of examples of women that I look up to and I relate. But I have to admit that more than women that are super successful and millionaires and just big stars or stuff like this, I am a big fan of people like Leah Busk, for example, which is the founder of TaskRabbit, one of my favorite startups ever, or Rebecca, or all the women from Women 2.0, who are just beautiful women, passion-driven, that are doing amazing stuff. And in a way, I look up to, but also relate and say, like, hey, in a couple of years, I can be like that. I can do that. So for me, for me, it's important to have examples you look at, but also relate. And so you can have somewhere to go to, not just somebody that is like unreachable or, you know, I don't know if I'm getting the idea across. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we have two women that have more experience. Tell us about what have been like your main challenges of being women and like balancing your professional life with your personal life. And what barriers did you have to break to be where you are now? Karen?
Yeah, I think, okay, let's see, you asked about barriers and... challenges being a woman. You know, looking back, and I'll answer your first question about mentors, or not mentors, you asked about women role models, and I'm going to give you a little bit of a different example. There's lots of women in business that I look up to. Senior women to me, junior, younger peers, everything. But when I was growing up, it was my mother and my aunt, my mother's younger sister. My mother was went to Stanford at age 15 and a half, youngest ever female to enter Stanford, graduated with a math degree at 19. and became a computer programmer before she became a mother of 5 children. And my aunt went to UCLA and was an engineer and worked at Xerox PARC. And so I had these two, growing up, I had these 2 examples of women in my life, one who became a mother and one who became a career woman her whole life. And so it never dawned on me that I couldn't do the same thing. And I never even knew they were role models. I mean, one was my mother. But what I realized as I got older was the fact that it was just ingrained in me that, of course, I could go to Stanford and I could be an engineer, or I could be a career person, or I could be a mother. All options were available. That was huge. And I think, particularly in a country like Mexico, the more that women can set an example to their children and the families that they can be anything they want to be, whether that's a mother or a working person or an entrepreneur or whatever, is great. Point number 1. Point number 2, obstacles. I was very lucky, and that was I chose a great industry, which is the tech industry. And I think the tech industry probably, compared to some industries, maybe is not the best, but it's certainly better than many industries in the way that it treats women. I always felt like I had every opportunity. But my people have asked me this same question many, many times, and I always answer the same way, which is my key about being a successful woman is I just forgot that I was a woman. And that, honestly, was my only strategy, is that it just never dawned on me that I was the only woman in the room, and I never felt like I was treated differently, to be perfectly honest. So now I know that's not true in every industry, so I don't mean to be flippant about it. But in tech, I think it's okay.
Yeah, and I have a pretty similar experience. I started out programming. I was an electrical engineering undergrad, and I think I grew up in a family of engineers, and so I was a very visual learner. I would, if my mom wanted me to learn how to sew, I would take apart the sewing machine, and my dad was just always very patient about it. He bought me an IBM PC Junior, the first thing I did was I opened it up. And it was just a family where they were just like, well, that's okay. She opened it up. She kind of broke it, but we'll put it back together again. And so I grew up with that kind of mentality of let's take things apart, rebuild it, and see what happens. And that was sort of my role model. I think the thing that changed me the most was when I was an undergrad, I was giving a tour to this guy around our college campus, and the dean of engineering had asked me to do this. It turned out it was the CEO of HP, and I had no idea. And he said, hey, Ann, what are you doing over spring break? I said, well, I'm visiting my parents. We're going to just hang out. And he was like, well, I'm the CEO of HP. Do you want to come visit me? And I said, I think that would be kind of nice. And in this incredible opportunity, I just visited him, followed him around, and I remember Bill Gates was there. And I was like, wow, this is a really unusual externship. And then when I got back to my dorm room, I had 2 pictures that were sent to me, and I have this framed in my office. One is a picture of myself talking to Lou Platt at the time in this chair, and the next picture was Bill Gates sitting in that same chair talking to Lou Platt. And it was just this very subtle message of, you can be whatever you want to be. He never actually said that, but it was sort of the message in these pictures. And that was my first experience with true incredible mentorship. And I think it sort of goes back to what Karen was saying. There's just these people who just kind of believed before I had any indication that I had any kind of talent. And it was through their belief that I started to believe in myself. And I think if there were any challenges, I actually experienced it much more at the ground level than as I started to build up my own career and have more confidence in myself. When I was originally programming, this was in my senior project in electrical engineering, we were doing robots. I had this one sort of very seminal experience where I would always describe the problem that I was encountering and all sorts of, in the way that I'd gone around these problems with I think and not sure, and these are the questions that I still have. And what was really interesting was the guy programmers that I was interfacing with, they were like, well, she has no idea what she's talking about. And I realized that as they were programming, they also had no idea what they were talking about, but they would say, I have the answer. It's awesome. And you guys don't ever have to even question me on it. And I was being way too transparent in my own language and my own communication about what I was unsure of. And they had to run around to the other teams that we were competing against to verify that my algorithm was correct. And I remember as this was happening, I was like, this is crazy. Why are they asking everyone else? No one else is sure of what's going on either. And it was a learning experience for me as to how I ought to communicate when I'm in the workforce. And once I mastered that, I got to a state where Karen's at. I forgot that I was a woman. And I would question and I would say things in the way that I really believed in them. And the moment that I remember feeling that I'd mastered that technique was when my husband, once we were walking around San Francisco, he asked me, yeah, you know, Ann, why do you think it is that the Bay Bridge is a double-decker bridge and the Golden Gate is just one deck? And I remember I just came up with this answer, and I felt really authoritative about it. And we just kept walking, and he said, you totally made that up, didn't you? And I hadn't even thought about it. I said, well, in fact, I had. And that kind of just sort of ability to just sort of roll with the punches came with some deal of training and comfort with myself. But I think in terms of challenges, it was just sort of overcoming my womanness and wanting to communicate everything, right? And living in a boy's rules, I think it's just something that you need to be able to do, but it doesn't stem from a sexist world that I existed in. It was just a different form of communication that men engaged in that I didn't understand. Once I understood that, it was great.
Okay, and Rebecca, what do you think about forgetting being a woman?
It's hard to forget. I'm pretty sure every time I look in a mirror, I'm sure of it. But I also have spent this entire career lifetime with men, and which was very different actually from my background. I didn't come from a family of engineers. In fact, my mom was stay-at-home and my dad was a doctor, and everyone was very much in the space of literature and art. And so when I came out and took apart my first telephone and didn't quite know how to put it back together, but tried really hard, they just didn't know what to do with me. There was nothing for it. And similarly, actually, I found myself nodding the whole time you were speaking, Anne, because I went to an HP program for engineering awareness, which is where I figured out that this thing that I liked to do, which was mathematics, could be put towards a job. Nobody had exposed me to engineering. Nobody had taught me that that was something I could do. Nothing around me was in that space. And through that program and then more work in mathematics, I ended up getting the chance to go and study CS and EE and being able to work in this field of engineering, which is truly a different way of thinking about problems. I don't view it as a man's way of thinking about problems or a woman's way of thinking about problems. It's believing that there is a solution if you think about it hard enough. And that's a different philosophy. It's a different way of looking at the world. And I love that. I love that we get to, every day, look at problems and not see them for that, but see them for opportunities. And I think that is why entrepreneurship is so exciting as well, is that it takes it to that next level. It says, okay, we are going to not just see opportunities, we're going to make something happen. We're going to disrupt the world. We're going to look at industries that are maybe antiquated in the way that they're approaching the problem and say, if we just change this one thing, everything will work out differently. And I think women like to change the world. I think they like to feel like they are important in the context of it. And so you see a lot more women getting interested in entrepreneurship and in changing the world from that context, not from making money, not from, but just being frustrated with problems and wanting to see it be addressed differently. So I'm really excited to be a part of this world. And I'm so grateful for HP and my telephone and my mom and dad who thought I was crazy and just let me go for it.
Okay. I would like to go with Celeste and Cristina. What do you think about supporting networks for entrepreneur women? And do you have any an example of a support network that has really helped you? Celeste?
Yeah, sure. I'm actually a big believer of networking. Before I did NuFlick, my startup, I used to blog and cover news around startups with a blog that is called Emprendela that still exists and is covering this event. And through that, I got access to a bunch of activities and events like Startup Weekend or Super Happy Dev House, not only on entrepreneurship, but also in technology. And because I've been now focused completely on my startup, I've been stopping going to a bunch of events and things, but I still believe about the power of connecting with peers and possible mentors, and just like creating this ecosystem. And right now, I'm very proud to be the lead organizer of Founder Friday in Mexico City, which is one of the events of Women 2.0, which focuses on creating that network that inspires other women to jump in and start a startup. And it's open for guys as well. So if you were ever in the first month, if the first Friday of the month in Mexico City, you should come. And I think it's been proving that the space is needed. We've done it for 5 times. Every time we get more than 100 people. And we've started seeing women making connections and working together after meeting in these events. And it just has been exploding naturally. Mexico in particularly, this event has been a success. Startup Weekend, for example, also has proven to be a success. And I think that every time we see these events overflow with people, it's a clear señal, how do you say señal? Sign that this is needed and that people want to share and create bridges of value together. So, yeah.
What about you, Cristina?
I love these kinds of events, but the problem is that every time we go to these events in Mexico, I don't know in other parts of the world, you always find the same people. So it's such a small network. There's still a lot of women that are missing in the whole entrepreneurial network. No? Cesar was tweeting, I don't know, 10 minutes ago, that only 3 women out of his 17 investments are CEOs of their companies. So we have to keep growing in that sense. And I think it's our task, our homework, that we have to invite more women to become entrepreneurs. I don't think many see it as an option, no? And I think for women, it's actually an amazing career path, no? Especially in Mexico, where there's more of the husband is like the provider and the woman has much more freedom. So why not start your own business, no? So I think there's a lot to do in that sense. And, but it's still the same, you know, because we're in Mexico, there's also all these, for example, the other day I was in a meeting and I was saying, oh, this girl is amazing, we should hire her for this project. And one of the guys in the meeting turned to me and said, no, she just got married. She'll probably want kids in a few years. And I was like, I want kids at some point. Like, you have to understand that we're women and we have to think about those things, no? So I think we still have to, and this is a person I really respect, and he's not at all macho, and, you know, he's like, he's a great person, but he still has that mindset. So we have to predicate, and we have to tell people, women and men, to start looking at us as entrepreneurs. And it's very funny because every time I go to a conference, especially with like businessmen and all that, they always think I'm either the daughter of one of the guys or the wife of one of the guys, and not an assistant to the event. So there's a lot to do, definitely.
Yes, I think so. And what you were saying about women having children, 65% of women in senior management positions in the US, they have 65% of women in senior management positions have children. So I think that there's a huge challenge for, especially here in Mexico. And I would love Anne to tell us, I know you have 3 kids and you have been really successful in your career. So why don't you tell us about your life in that?
My crazy life. Yeah, I get a lot of questions about work-life balance, and I always sort of chuckle to myself because the moment where you actually, you know, the word balance to me implies like a Zen-like state, right? It implies like nothing's moving, everything's still, and it's really quiet on the home front. My house is never quiet. I have 3 kids, 6, 3, and 1, and it's all about what do you decide is important, what's not, and it's all about having a partner who actually, you know, does 50% of the housework, and it's about having my parents live 3 miles away. And it's about not having to worry about whether or not the home is entirely clean when I go to bed or if all of the beds have been made in the morning. So it's, for me, all about prioritization and not really overthinking things. So if I had really thought through what it would take for me to have 3 kids and what on a day-to-day basis that would mean, I would have never even had one, right? And so so a lot of people say, like, what led you to the decision that you would have 3 children? And I said, well, we just didn't think about it, right? We're stupid. And honestly, you know, at the end of the day, am I glad we did? Yes, I'm thrilled. And to some extent, I always wanted to have like 3, maybe more kids, but we're done at 3, right? We're done. But still, it's this notion of, if you don't sit there and say, well, okay, at this moment, you know, if in 6 months will be the perfect time for me to start thinking about having children, because there's never such thing as good timing. And I think that if you let go of that notion, then you don't have high expectations for your social life or the cleanliness of your home or anything else, and then everything else works out.
Great.
That sounded really dreary, but actually my life is a lot better than that.
Rebecca, I would like to get into the techie stuff, and you are part of the Women 2.0. So I would like to ask you, how do you think women will get involved in this next tech cycle?
There's a bit of a trick to that question, which is women are already involved in that next tech cycle, and they are, in fact, already disrupting them. I mean, you already quoted Guilt Group. You know, you already spoke about Leia. There's also a million different women doing everything from Everpurse to Be a Sport to Goldie Blocks to, there's so many interesting women doing projects everywhere from, you know, innovative sort of fashion tech to stuff that they are working with respect to education and trying to change the education scene. So I think it is interesting because a lot of the female entrepreneurs that I work with came to this because they felt there was a problem. And so the problems they intend to address are specifically things that are bothersome to them as women. And so when you look at an industry where over 57% of online purchases are being made by women, if you look at, you know, a world where women are making a lot of the decisions with respect to the time of their children and what they do online, we have a huge marketplace there and a lot of women who are being drawn to entrepreneurship to solve problems they are seeing every day in the market. So I think women are already defining it, they're already starting to disrupt it, and it will continue to work in that fashion.
Just one thing leading on to that, I think if I look back in now it's been close to 30 years since I got out of college, there's a dramatic shift in the last 5-10 years of women entrepreneurs, programmers, doing startups, and that's extremely, extremely positive. And if you just look around the tech community, you see a lot more women moving up the chain of command, women investors like Anne, et cetera, that you didn't see 10 and 15 years ago. What still is a problem, and not just a problem that I think Mexico will face, it's something that's still apparent in Silicon Valley and in the US, is when you get up to the senior levels, publicly traded companies, you see very few on a relative basis, percentage basis, of women CEOs and board members. And something is happening, and I have a thought about what that is, which is women get up to a certain level, and then because of oftentimes pressures to go start families, and whether it's their male counterparts putting pressure on them, or whether it's self-inflicted pressure that they just think they can't do it all, they step off the treadmill, and they can't get back on again at the same level. And so there's this dearth of women talent up at those senior levels. And it's not just in the United States. It's in the UK. It's in other Western nations as well. So I do think we have a ways to go. And I think one of the things that I believe keenly on is this concept that, not that women can have it all, because I think this concept that you can be the perfect mother, be the perfect housekeeper, be a triathlete and be a CEO and is just a fallacy. I do think it's about priorities, but I think to Anne's point, women have to give up on this notion that they can't have a career and be, say, a mother at the same time. I think if you think that you're also going to be a triathlete and, 5 other things, you're probably, Martha Stewart Baker, you're probably, setting yourself up to fail. But I do think we need to, as a society in Mexico, America, other places, understand the concepts of women being able to have motherhood at the same time they have careers and juggle the two and run companies in a way that can happen. And it happens. Look, Anne does it. I can point to dozens of examples of women where they're very, very successful in that mode. But when you look at the top echelons of companies, you see this trail off, and that's worrisome, and it hasn't moved a lot in the last decade, and so that, to me, is something that bothers me.
Yeah, just sort of as a anecdote to that, I recently was looking for well-trained executive, basically, for a position, an open position that we were looking for talent. And I had a hypothesis that a woman would be really great for this role. And so I had posted to McKinsey's website, Bain, BCG, with very limited success for like really good, solid people. And on just a hunch, I posted to the Palo Alto Menlo Park Parents Network. And the post was taken down in 4 hours. And in that time period, I have 4 resumes from women who any search person would salivate all over. I mean, VP level people from significant companies throughout Silicon Valley. And to me, that was an indication of there are women out there, extraordinary backgrounds, but they're trailing off for a variety of reasons. But yes, there's definitely a problem with that continuity at the executive level. And that creates problems for investors because there's not enough investors with that kind of background and also executives for startup companies.
Yes, I think there must be implementation of policies in the enterprises and the big companies so women can have more opportunities to prioritize and go and be with their families, but also not lose all the professional background they have. I was just reading in Switzerland, they have 6-month maternity leave and 3-month paternity leave. So I would like to ask you, maybe Karen, if you could tell us one best practice that Mexico should follow to involve more women in entrepreneurship and leadership, what would that be?
Well, I think to some degree it starts at the university level, at the educational, or even before, right? It starts at the educational level. So to the extent to which Mexico could encourage young women in universities into technical and business-oriented fields, I think that this, and/or in classes in entrepreneurship, et cetera, as we've been talking about, I think that would go a long way because I think when women have the example at a young age, then I think quite frankly, they solve 9 out of the 10 problems that they'll encounter when they hit the workforce, whether it's some amount of discrimination or the macho culture, if that exists, other ceilings. I think those get solved, but I think you hit it young, and when women are young. And in some ways, people might even say, I'm talking about an age that's too old because by the time they get to university, they've already been polluted with what they're good at and not. Other people might say, I think educators might say you got to get girls before they get polluted to thinking forget what age it is. What is it? 8 to 12. When they flip switching, when they start going from the Beth Math student to believing they're the worst. Mm-hmm. So I think education plays a key role.
Okay, thanks. I think it's time for Q&A. So, if someone has a question.
Anyone have a question? Okay, Cesar.
Cesar again.
We'll have to wrap it up right after that. We've only got time for really just one question.
I don't want to lose friends anymore. No, I want to. So actually, I love to lose friends. So. I love the theme around women, and you know that, or probably you know that we invest a lot in women, and because of the change in like different kinds of problems that you guys are trying to solve. However, I always get tired about this topic coming up again and again, and I feel like it's even like making it harder to make people fit into it, the right culture and being more diverse. So, do you believe that bringing up the word women more and more and more is actually helping? And if that's the case, I mean, why?
So I will actually say, I do think it helps. I think it helps because every time you see a role model you identify with, that is when you no longer see it as a barrier. When you understand that your mother is in fact an amazing role model and you grew up with that you don't create those barriers. So the more women we have out there, the more that we are promoting them, the more they are understanding that they can do what these other women are doing, the better. And I think the same goes, Mr. Ontiveros earlier made the same point, that we need to see cultural people we understand, people we identify with succeed. And when you see the people you identify with succeed, you see yourself in their shoes and you move forward. And you're right that identifying one group and saying women aren't here and so we need to get more women here, you want to find smart people. And there are smart people in every group. Women are graduating with more collegiate degrees. Women are out there doing incredible things. And there are plenty of smart, intelligent women solving good problems. So the time is to look, not to talk about women as a group, as an underrepresented group. It's to look and see intelligent people, turn off all of the gender scoping and just focus on intelligence and promote those people.
Well, one last point. I mean, what I would say is in our firm right now, you know, it's because it's me and Mike. We're fortunately sort of 50% female diverse, right? And so what we call that is we call that gender neutrality, right? And for us, it's been awesome because every next hire that we make, we don't have to decide not to go to Vegas and the strip malls anymore. We can just say, we already have policies where, you know, I force Mike to sit down and drink tea with me. And we have very gender neutral things that we do. We don't have to think about what gender the next hire is going to be. I believe that that's the best policy, actually, for all startups and all companies. So if you already had a board of directors that was gender neutral, that's awesome because you don't have to think about the next person and their gender. And in fact, the next person who comes on board feels already very comfortable. And so you now actually have 100% of surface area of all humans to hire from, right? And I think that is much more powerful in terms of your ability to hire the very best talent. And because we know that there are awesome women out there in all sorts of different fields, your competitive advantage by being gender neutral is going to be huge. And so I believe that that's sort of the way we ought to start looking at the world, not these panels about whether or not we have enough women in particular areas. We want to strive for a world of gender neutrality. And I think at that point, we win.
Thank you so much. This has been a great panel conversation.